Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's planning public meeting. I'm going to call the meeting to order now. We have regrets from Councillor Bell. However, I note we do have quorum. And we're going to begin the meeting by, I'm going to ask Councillor Greenfield to read our land acknowledgement.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and welcome everyone to this planning meeting. We would like to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which includes the Chippewas of Nawash, an unceded First Nation, and the Chippewas of Saugeen First Nation. We also recognize the Métis, whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. We extend our gratitude to all Anishinaabe and Métis peoples and their descendants, past, present, and future, who continue to care for and inhabit these lands and tend to these waters.
Thank you, Councillor. And now just join me for a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. Good afternoon, everyone. In relation to item 5B, upon the advice of our Integrity Commissioner, I would like to say that I have a disqualifying interest because where I live, that property abuts Meaford Haven.
And Councillor Uhrig?
Coincidentally, I have the same issue, so I will have the same concern. So
unfortunately, we will still have quorum. Yes, I'm glad you came too. So I want to welcome everyone today. We're here to learn about land use planning applications applying to certain lands in the municipality of Meaford. It's important to note that the Planning Act requires that persons who may later wish to file an appeal on council's decision on these matters must either provide verbal comments today at this public meeting or provide written comments to council before the decision is made. The intention of this requirement is that only those persons who have taken the time and the care to learn about the proposal and be involved in the planning process have gained the opportunity to appeal a decision to the Land Tribunal. Under the Planning Act, Council is legally required to make decisions that conform to the county and local official plans. It is within this legal framework and our guiding policies that we are having this open public meeting to give persons the opportunity to make formal statements about the applications before us. Your statements do not have to declare a position on the application being considered and can be focused on specific characteristics if you wish. By making your constructive statements, you are providing the municipality with key insights into the public's perspectives. Council has a variety of legal tools available that can be applied to development to ensure that it addresses potential negative impacts and meets the adopted policies and regulations of the municipality. Those who have pre-registered for today's meetings will have an opportunity to speak remotely or in person. Given the complexity of development applications, you should expect that many of the matters raised during today's meeting will require further research and analysis to be undertaken. However, the applicant will have an opportunity to respond at the end of the meeting if they wish. And I'll now call today's first public meeting to order. This is a public meeting to consider a zoning bylaw amendment for lands known as 157080 7th Line in Meaford. This meeting is a mandatory part of the planning process, which has been set out by the Planning Act. Based on the rules in the Act, there must be at least 20 days' notice given to residents within 120 meters of the property. Notice of the zoning bylaw amendment was issued on October 13th, 2023, giving the required 20 days' notice. So let's get started, and I'm first going to call on Meredith Gillespie, planner, to share a brief description of the application and to provide us with any public and agency comments that have been received to date. Meredith?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everybody. So yes, we're going to get started and get right into it today. So the first application is for 157080 7th Line. It's application Z09-2023. Just so everyone is aware on this context, the purpose of today's public meeting is to hear the presentation from planning staff with some details about the subject lands and the planning application. Also to provide an opportunity for the applicant to speak on their behalf about their proposal. And finally, to provide a forum for the public to comment on this proposal. So the property owner for this application would like to establish a workshop as a home industry on their farm. And home industries are also known as on-farm diversified uses. So the proposed workshop and outdoor area would use approximately 7,650 square meters of the 40-hectare property. And it proposes the workshop building area up to 750 square meters. The reason for the application is that Meaford zoning bylaw currently limits a home industry to a maximum of 250 square meters. So the purpose of the application is twofold. First is to seek permission for the larger workshop than is currently permitted in the zoning bylaw. And secondly, to allow for outdoor storage to be located in the front yard, where the zoning bylaw requires it to be located in the rear yard. So as usual, some context about where the lands are located. It's at 157-080 line, which is part of Lot 2, Concession 7th South in Geographic Township of St. Vincent. You can see it there in yellow. The surrounding area is agricultural. There's farms surrounding this property from the north, east, south, and west. And as mentioned, the lands are approximately 40 hectares or around 100 acres in total in size. So the Grey County official plan designates these lands as agricultural, rural, and hazard lands. As you've seen before, the hazard lands are in green, the agriculture is in brown, and the rural is in white. So all of the zoning bylaw amendment today would be located on the agricultural lands, not in the rural area and not in the hazard lands at all. So the agricultural designation permits a variety of different uses, as to be expected, agricultural and agriculture related uses. Also on-farm diversified use, which is what the application is for today. It's a permitted use. Residential and accessory residential. There aren't any buildings or structures proposed, as I mentioned, in the hazard lands. So that's not of concern. Meaford official plan is similar in how it designates the properties. It's agricultural, rural, and environmental protection. And as we know, hazard lands and environmental protection are the same thing. So similarly, I won't go through the whole list. It's really very similar policies on what's permitted in agricultural lands in the Meaford official plan and in the Grey County official plan. Agricultural related uses, on-farm diversified uses. They are permitted. So at the moment, the lands are zoned as agricultural, rural, and environmental protection, also known as hazard lands. And in the zoning bylaw, the proposed use is identified as a home industry. And so because the industry proposed is a metal working shop. So they are permitted in lands designated as agricultural, subject to certain provisions in the zoning bylaw. So this application, we did a review as part of the pre-consultation with the applicant about this file. And as part of that review, we determined that there were two things that were necessary as part of the zoning bylaw amendment, which I mentioned before. One is the outdoor storage. And then, as we spoke about, is the increased permission in size, basically granting the applicant a larger workshop than what is currently permitted. So if this application is approved, what we will do is grant an exception to the agricultural lands. And I'll just clarify here, not the entire, just a portion of the area that is currently zoned as agriculture would be have this exception applied. So what that means is that the exception, which would grant the two things we've been discussing, a larger workshop and the outdoor storage in the front yard, would only be, there would basically be additional permissions granted for the applicant only within that area that we choose to zone to grant that permission. So other than that, the rest of the lands would remain with their regular permitted uses for rural, agricultural, and hazard or environmental protection. And there's no changes proposed to those to rural or EP. So it's a little small, but I know that you would have all circulated, I would have circulated all of this to you prior to, but this is showing the area that would actually be rezoned. And you can see the two permissions, permitting a larger workshop and permitting the outdoor storage to be in the front yard. And so the area is relatively close to the 7th line, which will grant easier access for the industry. And you can see on the diagram, the outdoor storage, is just in front of the, kind of to the left of the shop there. So that's most of the presentation. Just as a reminder, we are kind of at the 3rd step right now of the of the application process, where we've received the application, we've done our review, we've deemed it complete. We're holding the public meeting to engage with the public and council on the issue. We'll then do our review, make our recommendations to council through a staff report. Council will make their decision to pass or not pass the zoning bylaw amendment. Then there is an appeal period of 20 days, and if there are no appeals, the decision is final. So if anyone would like to remain part of this process, and we encourage you to, you can submit comments in writing to the email address up on the screen. So that is planning@meaford.ca. Or your other options are to drop a letter at 15 Trowbridge Street West during business hours, just 8:30 to 4:30, Monday to Friday. You can also drop off at the after hours drop box at 21 Trowbridge Street West, the administration office, or you can mail a letter to 21 Trowbridge Street West, and the information is there. But we do need to receive the comments prior to the decision being made by council on the file. So that's the end of the presentation. I have not yet mentioned that after the zoning bylaw amendment, the use will be subject to site plan control. So after a decision has been made, we will go through site plan control for the file to get through some of the more detailed elements of the design of the property. And I will finish with the comments received so far on the file. Comments with no concerns have been received from Grey County, Grey Sauble Conservation Authority, and Historic Saugeen Métis. Grey Sauble Conservation Authority noted that a permit will be required because a portion of the property is regulated. So prior to applying for any building permits for the shop, the applicant would need to apply to Grey Sauble for a permit first. But other than that, that was all the comments received. Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith. Is the applicant present? Yes. Would you mind just, Meredith will turn on your mic there, and if you wouldn't mind stating your name just for the record, thank you.
Hello, it's Solomon Martin. I was the applicant for this file. And I don't have any comments really.
Okay, maybe you just stay at the microphone for a minute, Mr. Martin, and we'll ask if there are no pre-registrants to speak in person at this meeting. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to make any comments at this point? And then I'll ask councillors if you have any questions of Mr. Martin or any Deputy Mayor Keaveney.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I did have a question for you, Mr. Martin, if I may. I'm looking at the last diagram that Meredith displayed for us. I see the location of the shop, and next to that, there's a proposed gravel yard. And I'm wondering, is that what you would use for parking?
Yes, the parking would be within that gravel yard, yes.
Yes,
I think I marked parking on there somewhere, or did I not?
unless I'm missing
The
it.
blue squares with the P in it?
Oh, I see. Yes. Okay, so the existing entrance is to be closed. And then below that, it says existing entrance to stay but will be modified. I just wondered if I could get that clarified.
So there's two entrances right now. The one is really steep, which doesn't really get used anymore. Then there's another one that kind of goes around the hill, and that one would be modified a little bit, but that one is the one to stay.
Any other council questions? Are there any points raised? Well, there were no points raised, I don't think so. Denise, did you wish to speak? Oh, I'm sorry, I did not see your hand, Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kentner. I put it up late.
Go ahead.
You're tearing down the barn that's there. There's a house there. Is you're tearing down the house also?
I think they might take it down and rebuild it. Yes, it's not in very good shape, but there would be a house on there, yes.
So everything is going to be built close to the road. On the sign, on the map, it would be east of the hazard land, that little wee section at the front. Is that correct?
Yes. That hazard land is actually, they had a permit from Grace Hopple to tile drain it, so it's really actually not hazard land. It's cropped there now, so.
It's a little creek, and you got permission to take it out?
It wasn't really a creek, it was just a little dike, I think. But he had a permit from Grace Hopple, yes.
Grace Hall is going to let you take that out.
Well, it's gone already, I think, yes.
Oh. Interesting. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, well, sorry, Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, your worship, and thanks, Mr. Martin. There's also a proposed shed on our illustration here now. Will it have to do with the workshop? Will it be a companion to the workshop, or will it be for something entirely different?
It will be a farm storage shed, yes.
So we are at the point where actually I should invite you to make any concluding comments. So if you have anything more to say, just go right ahead, okay?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, well, thank you very kindly for joining
you.
us today. So I want to thank everyone for attending this meeting and sharing your thoughts on the application. This matter will now be referred back to Development Services staff to follow up on any additional information required from the applicant based on the matters raised today. Once staff are satisfied that they have all necessary information needed to provide a recommendation on the application, a detailed planning report will be brought back to council to assist us in our decision-making. This report will evaluate how the proposal does or does not satisfy the provincial, county, and municipal policies that must be considered as part of council's decision. It will also explore the various public and agency comments received regarding the application, noting those tools which may be applied in order to address concerns raised and to mitigate potential impacts on nearby properties. If you would like to receive mailed notice of a future decision on this file, please provide your contact information to the Planning Services Division by email at planning@meaford.ca. And now I'll call today's next public meeting to order. And this is a public meeting to consider a zoning bylaw amendment for lands known as 206080 Highway 26 in Meaford. This meeting is a mandatory part of the planning process that has been set out by the Planning Act. Based on the rules in the Act, there must be at least 20 days' notice given to residents within 120 meters of the property. Notice of the zoning bylaw amendment was issued on October 13th, 2023, giving the required 20 days notice. So we'll get started and once again ask Meredith Gillespie, our planner, to share a brief description of the application and provide us with any public and agency comments that have been received to date. The municipality is also the applicant for this file, so any questions for the applicant should also be directed to Meredith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, on to the second file for this evening, second and final file. So as mentioned, this one is for, this application is for 206080 Highway 26. And the file is Z10-2023. You may know this property as Meaford Haven. The purpose of the meeting is again to hear a presentation from planning staff about some of the details about the application and the subject lands, and to provide a forum for the public to comment on the proposal. So this is a municipal-led application where instead of the kind of ordinary process where a member of the public is the applicant, we ourselves, in this case, as the municipality, are the applicant. And the reason for that is that the application seeks to basically make a correction to the existing zoning on the subject property. So the section of the property that we are seeking a correction for is a section that is currently zoned environmental protection. And I think it's worth going into a little bit of context here. So bylaw 003-2013, which was approved on January 28th, 2013, amended the zoning bylaw 60-2009 and established a portion of the lot as, at that time, as environmental protection. During a subsequent housekeeping update, the lands that were zoned as EP during that 2013 approval were then changed without regard for any previous development approvals, such as the one that was granted in 2013 for the subject lands. And while the changes that were made in that housekeeping update were fairly minor, they did impact this development, and specifically Block 4 of the draft plan of subdivision. And Block 4 is the location of the first phase of the development, phase 1, which will involve the development of 55 townhouse units. So when the ownership of the property changed, the issue of the misalignment of the EP lands where, you know, they were originally a certain way, and then the new, basically a layer of a base layer was provided by Grace Sable Conservation Authority, which was incorrect. And so this issue of the misalignment came up. And so the purpose of the application before council today is to realign the EP zone with the previous approval that was granted in 2013. And so the area that's proposed to be rezoned from environmental protection will be rezoned, if approved, to open space with exception. And so it's OS-200 zone. And this zone is specifically the only permitted use is a stormwater management facility. And the other section that it would be rezoned to, the other zone it would be rezoned to, is residential multiple withholding. So RM-H5. The H5, the holding provision, would only be lifted once council is satisfied that an appropriate development agreement has been executed. So this slide just gives some further context that I kind of explained, so I won't dwell on that. So I've got some context for those who are not familiar. The subject application is for 206080 Highway 26, which is part lot 1697 of Plan 309. It's located just south of Highway 26. Surrounding the property to the north, it's vacant, but there is a development application in for future residential development on those lands. To the east there are already residential properties there. To the south, there are a few residential properties, but most of the lands there are vacant. Again, future development will be occurring there. And to the west, lands are used for agriculture, and there's a residence there. And the lands in totality are approximately 15 hectares in size. So onto the Meaford official plan, the lands are currently designated as urban living area, urban highway commercial, and environmental protection. And just to note that minor changes to the extent of the lands that are designated as environmental protection in the Meaford official plan can be made. We don't actually need to go through an official plan amendment to update those designations in the Meaford official plan. We can just make those minor changes through the process we're going through right now of a zoning bylaw amendment. See the policy there. So the current zoning on the property, there's quite a few different zones. So right now it is, there's commercial 2 with exception and holding provision 5. And there's a couple of different exceptions. So there's C2-239 with an H5, C2-240 with an H5, and C2-241 also with an H5. Portion of the lands is zoned as development, as open space with exception, which we've been speaking about already tonight, residential multiple with holding provision 5, residential multiple with holding provision 5 and holding provision 7, and environmental protection. So I apologize for those in the crowd. I know it is a little bit small to see on the screen, but I've done my best to indicate on the schedule that you see there. What I've done is I've taken the schedule that was actually approved in 2013. So that's what you're looking at on the screen. And I've highlighted using that red box, the area that was approved at that time. And so what you can see when we look at the kind of draft schedule for the proposed changes is that the current zoning has a bit of basically a bump out in that environmental protection area. And so this application proposes to essentially change that bump out, the zoning on that bump out, to the 2 zones that are most adjacent to it, which is the RMH5 and the OS-200. So essentially it will allow for the permitted uses for our residential multiple and open space 200. There will be a little bit more land as a result of this to be used for those purposes if it is approved. So that is the most of the presentation there. Again, we're at the public meeting stage of the process. So we still have the full review to do and to write our staff report to council, after which council will make their decision on whether or not to pass the zoning bylaw amendment. Then there will be that appeal period of 20 days, after which the decision will be final if there are no appeals. Once again, we encourage you to get involved and submit comments in writing to planning@meaford.ca, or you can drop off a letter either during business hours or in the after hours drop box, or mail a letter. And the information is there available for you to read, and that's about it. I'm just going to finish up here momentarily here. So I want to summarize the comments that were received. So comments with no concerns have been received from Ministry of Transportation, Grey County, Grey Sauble Conservation Authority, and also Historic Saugeen Métis. The comments that were received from Ministry of Transportation note that MTO, which is the Ministry of Transportation, permits will be required before any demolition, grading, construction, or alteration to the site commences. And also that they have classified Highway 26 in this area as a 2B arterial highway. But generally, all of their comments are that they are supportive of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. And I was just going to note as well that the comments from GSCA noted that they've actually revised the hazard mapping layer to reflect the proposed changes, so that in the future, this error will not be repeated in future base maps that have been provided to the municipality by Grey Sauble. Since we get our, and I know this was one of the comments that we had received, is where does the EP layer come from? Since we get that information from Grey Sauble, it helps a lot that they've gone through and corrected this so that the same issue doesn't come up again. Finally, I'll just summarize the comments from the public. There was one set of comments received. So this member of the public who signed up to be registered to speak today essentially had questions about the existence of an inventory of butternut trees, and had questions regarding the town's current provisions around such trees. Secondly, he had questions around how environmental protection lands are identified and the process for changes to environmental protection lands. And finally, had some questions regarding an easement behind the member of the public's property, so this gentleman's property, and whether this would be part of the EP lands. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Okay. Are you pre-registered to speak? Oh, yes. Okay. Well, you're going to be speaking momentarily, Dick. There are 3 pre-registrations to speak in person at the meeting by members of the public, and the first is Dick Snyder. So you now have the opportunity to speak, Mr. Snyder. Just go, and you can take the podium there, and the mic is on.
The mic is on. It's often been said, don't give Dick a mic.
Lean into it so we can hear you, okay? That's good.
Sure.
Thank you.
How's that?
Excellent.
Okay. I don't know if it's permitted or not, but I was going to ask Meredith a quick question about her presentation, and that is, you described the southern border of that property as having a few residents. It's absolutely cram-packed with residents, and mine is one of them. So Meaford Golf Mews has been taken into account? Okay.
Thank you, Meredith.
We just don't like to be described as a few because we're many. May I begin by saying good afternoon to you, Mr. Mayor, to councilors, staff, and everyone else here. Hope you're having a good day. And thank you for your time today. My name is Dick Snyder. I live in Unit 32 at 410 Ridge Road. Meaford Golf Mews is the area that is what it's called, basically. And my backyard abuts directly upon this property, as do the backyards of many of my friends and neighbors here. It's difficult from the zoning map to determine the location and dimensions of either of the zones to be adjusted or the nearby zones. There's no dimensions, and it makes it difficult to find out exactly where they are and how big they are. So my concern and my question, therefore, related to this particular adjustment is, do either of the zones to be changed overlap in any way on any of the RM H5, H7 zones in the area?
Did you want to respond to that, Meredith?
Certainly, yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, excuse me. No, yeah, so the answer to that is no. So the lands that are going to be changed as part of this application, if it is approved, are currently environmental protection, and they will become the RM H5 lands in one part, and in the other part, they will become OS-200, so the open space. So there's no change to the RM with the H5 and the H7.
Thank you.
Okay, great. And the H7, of course, is the butternut trees, which we should all be concerned about. So on the subject of butternut tree protection zoning, I'm looking at the Meaford zoning map, Schedule B, Map 3, dated May 2021, and comparing it with the IBI Group site plan entitled Concept 4, dated 2021-04-14, which I believe is the site plan approved by the municipality of Meaford. Yet to be confirmed. It's what's on the website. All right. Map 3 shows RM H5, H7 butternut zones in 4 locations, 2 of which are along the northern boundary of the southern stream EP zone. The other 2 are along part of the south lot line, in particular, the southeast corner of the property. Now, if you were to take the site plan and have it made into a transparency, change the ratios, etc., and superimpose that on the zoning map, you would find that all of the H7 butternut tree protection zones are gone. Would anybody be able to advise, or what I would like is advice as to whether the H7 zone has been lifted on any of the previous H7?
I'm going to ask Denise McCarl to speak to that. She's our chief planner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking at the zoning map that was in Mayor's presentation. I don't know if we can have that put back up, if Derek would be able to do that for us, but the butternut tree area is not actually subject to this particular application, and we're happy to help clarify any zoning questions that are unrelated in the municipal office if that would work, because we can't really look at any of the things that are being talked about right now. But just to clarify, so I don't know if you can see that, sir, but can you see the red box in the upper part there, just below the pink?
Sorry, I can't.
Okay. That's the area we're talking about. So that's the only area that we're talking about today. So we're not able at this particular forum to discuss any of the other parts of the application just because it's not part of this particular public meeting. But in our office, we get happy to flip through any of the old documents and talk about what's changed or not changed. We haven't lifted any H7s that I'm aware of. The zoning that you see there shows some H7s, and I'm not aware that we've changed any of that. The zoning that we approved last year didn't have anything to do with the south part of the property or any of the butternut areas.
So
Okay.
does that satisfy you, Mr. Snyder? Like you have not?
Really, I think what I'm asking, or what I would like to ask is, ask you, is because this isn't exactly, it's to do with the property concerned here, but it's not to do exactly with this tiny little bit of land that you wanted to make adjustments to, that we're not allowed to ask questions or get answers?
Well, I think what she's saying is that the subject of butternut trees is not some part of the scope of this meeting.
But
that you-
zoning is.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Correct, zoning is, but only the part of the zoning that we're talking about today. So we're not changing any of the other zoning. So it's just as it has been approved from the 2013. The only parts that changed after 2013 was what was changed in, I believe, Margaret let me know it was November 6, 2022, when we did the last zoning amendment, which just dealt with some of the property area close to Highway 26. When we basically took some of the commercial away and replaced it with residential area. That was the only other change. We haven't made any other changes to any of the butternut areas or any of the other approved zoning areas from 2013. But we can do that have a discussion where we can look at the maps that that do deal with the property and the butternuts in our office. We're not able to look at them at this time, so we can record the question and get back later, but it's not related to this particular zoning amendment.
So, Mr. Snyder, what Ms. McCarroll is offering is a meeting with you where you can look at the maps and she can answer any questions you have about that issue.
Yes, I'd like to arrange a meeting, and also, and one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this up at this meeting is because I wanted to be part of the record. We have a
Which you
meeting
are.
in somebody's office someplace, it's not recorded, and the work I've done in this goes unrecorded.
Yes, you know which office we're talking about. That I think it's 15 Trowbridge Street. So that's the old post office building.
What would be, would I phone somebody to make arrangements?
You know, I think if you just stay till the end of the meeting, why the staff will arrange something
Okay.
for you. And thank you very much.
All right,
Okay.
thank you.
The second registrant is Bob Brownridge, and Mr. Brownridge, go right ahead. You may want to adjust that microphone up a bit.
My feet reach the ground, so it works out well. Bob Brownridge, and I've been interested in wildlife and the wise use of our natural resources right from a very young age. And I was very honored to be able to write children's stories in a national publication, educating kids. Ranger Rick, I don't know if you've heard of it or not, but I have been interested in wildlife for quite a while. And thank you, Mayor Kentner, for letting me speak today. I'm particularly interested in two species of endangered birds, and well, you already talked about the butternut. The birds have made a home in the parcel of land, and I'd like to see an environmental impact statement performed on the land. I thought we were talking about the whole land. I see we're just talking about one portion of it, but there are birds back there that are endangered, and they may be on that small property that you're talking about. I know they're on the very large 40+ acre site. This parcel of land and the beautiful trees are like a 5-star resort for migratory birds. The rotting and dead trees may be an eyesore to many of us, but they provide a roadside buffet and a bed and breakfast for wildlife. An environmental impact study is required to be conducted when a development is proposed, typically within 120 meters of a natural area. System and/or feature, or is reasonably expected to have adverse effects on the area, system, feature, or function. This would definitely be within 120 meters. Completion of an environmental impact study does not ensure development will be approved, and conversely, identifying natural heritage features does not necessarily result in a rejection of the proposal. The last environmental study that I was able to determine was done in 2011. The Endangered Species Act is the Ontario government's legislative commitment to protection and recovering species at risk and their habitats. Under the Endangered Species Act, the government must ensure that a recovery strategy is prepared for each species that is listed as endangered or threatened. A recovery strategy provides science-based advice to government on what is required to achieve recovery of a species. I have pictures of both the red-headed woodpeckers and the pileated woodpeckers, if you all would like to see it. These are taken up by you want to pass it around. They're beautiful birds. The red-headed woodpecker, the recovery strategy for the red-headed woodpecker in Ontario was completed on September 6th of 2022. The red-headed woodpecker receives protection under the Migratory Birds Convention Act of 1994, which protects adults and young birds as well as their nests and eggs. And under the Federal Species at Risk Act 2002 as an endangered species. The red-headed woodpecker is listed as an endangered species under the ESA, which protects both the animal and its habitat. The ESA prohibits harm or harassment of the species and damage or destruction to its habitat without authorization or complying with the requirements of a regulatory exemption. It is estimated that the abundance of the red-headed woodpecker declined in North America by 86% and in Ontario by 83%. In the 20-year period between the first and second Ontario breeding bird atlases, the overall probability of observing a red-headed woodpecker declined by 64%. There are several threats that may have a cumulative effect on the red-headed woodpeckers in Ontario. The primary threats are loss of habitat, nesting sites, and degradation of suitable habitats, as well as reduction of food supply, including insects because of insecticides in the farms. The next thing is a pileated woodpecker. As you can see, it's a beautiful bird again. The migratory bird regulation prohibits capture, kill, take, injure, or harassment of migratory birds without a permit and protects pileated woodpecker nests when they contain a live bird or viable egg. I'm thinking that maybe no one has checked that area for the nests of the pileated woodpecker. As of July 2022, there is also a year-round protection for 18 migratory bird species who reuse the nests of the pileated woodpecker. These birds cannot be destroyed, damaged, disturbed, or removed. From those 18 species of migratory birds in Canada, whose nests are commonly reused, the most common one encountered in the regular forest vegetation is the pileated woodpecker. Migratory birds will nest where the pileated pecker was. They're reused for many years, several years, by this that species and by other migratory birds who are not capable of excavating their own cavities. There's extensive documentation on the importance of the pileated woodpecker. And as of July 2022, in the migratory bird regulations, it has been defined as a keystone species, meaning it has a disproportionately large effect on its natural environment relative to its abundance for the cavity nesting community. The cavities that they dig out are critical and limiting resource for many migratory birds, both for nesting and for overwinter survival. Thus, the migratory bird regulations of 2022 provide protection for 3 years for this species and its nest in forested areas if occupied by a migratory bird for nesting, which basically means if the nest has been abandoned for 3 years, then it's okay to remove the nest. I don't think that's been done since 2013. And I know that at least 3 pileated woodpeckers are in that area right now. I don't know if they're in the red box area or not, but I know 120 meters would certainly encompass a lot more than what's in that red box area. I won't talk about the butternut trees because Dick just did that. And the Ministry of Environment of Ontario, the Grey County Natural Environment Commission, and the Meaford Planning Commission should all be reminded of these regulations and report on how they're being enforced before any adjustment is done to the site plan and for the site plan itself. We back onto a beautiful wildlife habitat, and it would be a shame to see it eliminated. There are 39 homes, which I think is more than just a few, that back on to that forested area. Again, it's a 5-star resort back there for wildlife. And I will ask the people in our neighborhood to get in touch with Kara Salustro at the Ministry of Environment, Scott Taylor at Grey County, who was the one who performed the site looking for wildlife in this area in 2011, and planning in Meaford. And thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. The third registrant is John Endert, who will be participating virtually. John, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
John Endert.
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Very good. You're on. Go right ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you, your worship and council. I guess the comments that I made were maybe more general to our specific area, being at Meaford Mews, maybe not so much in terms of this particular application. However, the previous 2 gentlemen that talked about our area brought up the subject of the butternut, so I won't get into that a little anymore, except to say that I did ask in my email to your planning committee about 10 questions that were relating to the butternut tree situation. So I'm not sure if I will get a response to that, but it would be nice to know whether I will get a response. The other, I guess, part of my email related to a trail or an easement. I'm not sure what it is at the back of our properties, which has been, I guess, open for many years. Quite a few people walk in behind our properties along this trail. And I'm just wondering whether this has been recognized in terms of a site plan or any kind of planning. And I guess my question related to, what this trail or easement might provide for in the future. And, I guess that's really all the questions that I had. There was about 16 questions I had altogether, 10 of them relating to the butternut, and the rest of them related to this trail or easement. So I'm not sure if there's anybody there that could comment this evening or would like to comment this evening at all about the trail or the easement area at the back of our property. But of course, it is abutting our backyard, and would like to know how that's going to affect our view or our neighbors to the north. That's all I have to say. Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Endert. Does anyone wish to respond to Ms. McCarroll?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not 100% sure where this trail is that is being mentioned, but I did see a picture of one of the trails in a photo that was sent to Planning Services a little while ago. I don't know if that trail that they're speaking about is actually on private property, or if it's on the lands at Meaford Mews, but because I haven't walked on it myself. But a lot of these questions are just not related to this particular zoning amendment. I understand where the questions are coming from, because there's renewed interest in Meaford Haven, and so some people have some questions about what was previously proposed. It was very similar last time when we went through this process with Meaford Haven for some of the small changes. So like I said, we can look at some mapping in our office. If someone wants to show us what they're talking about in terms of the trail, show us the trail location. I suspect it's probably on private property, because that does sometimes happen, but I'm not 100% sure since I haven't been on the property. Now, the good news is that the property owner's planner is also here, who may be able to answer a question or two about Meaford Haven specifically, but this isn't really the time to get too deep into the next phases and things like that, because we're really not working on those future phases. We're really just working on phase 1 or the block 4 right now, which isn't really anywhere near the woods that I think people are most interested in at this point. Back when we were looking at the map, it was just really, really close to Country Crescent. And that's really the only part that we're talking about. It's a very small area of land that's proposed to be rezoned. It's that cross-hatched bit there. There's a little triangle and then a little weird shape that's there. And that's it. So I know everyone's really interested in some of those other lands because they do have a lot of woods on them, but they're not part of this particular portion of the rezoning. This is really the reason we're here today is just because we've admitted that Meaford had made a mistake when we changed the zoning for the hazard lands. And so we've agreed to do this for the applicant because it isn't really fair that this got changed without their knowledge. It's not normally the way it's done. When somebody has gone through the process of doing the study work on a property, we don't usually do a comprehensive update and add in hazard lands. So that's really why we're doing this for the applicant on this property, and why we're the applicant as Meaford, because we did make a mistake that we're trying to rectify. So I think the future phases that everyone's really interested in are probably coming at a later time. But if the applicant's planner wants to speak to that at all, like the trail, if she's aware of any of this, she might have more intimate knowledge of the property in those lands, because I don't really have authorization to be walking in that area at this point. But I'm happy to look at any maps or pictures in our office. I know some people have already been working with our staff already to show some things and to take a look at some of the previous approvals, and we prepared a package at the front counter so people could take a look.
Thank you, Denise. Would you like to speak? If you don't mind just stating your name. Thank you.
Kristen Rennie from Georgian Planning Solutions. I'm the planning consultant for the property owner. I'm also going to take this opportunity to just introduce the new name for the property. It's no longer Meaford Haven. It's Bay Bounds. So there you go. I've officially made it official. Thank you for your time, Mr. Mayor and council members. Again, like Denise had mentioned, we're really looking at a very small area on this property that sort of accommodates our first phase, which is 55 townhouse units. A lot of the conversation is about what's happening on the south side of the EP lands. And I'll be honest that that's way into the future. We're dealing with the properties that are up towards the north and Highway 26 at this point. It's going to be a few years before we get to that back part. From an environmental perspective, we have a consultant with us, with our team that has been on site when the new property owners took control of the property. We've walked the site. We've done butternut assessments throughout the entire property, as well as updating our endangered species work on the property at this point. So we are there. We know what's there. We know the issues that we need to deal with moving forward. A lot of the issues are related to the back part of the portion of the property, and there are butternuts that are back there. However, at this point, we have not assessed them this year. We did do the butternuts that were on the south side of or the north side of the EP lands, which are part of that first phase, if you want to call it that, on the property, but not at the back because it's just so far in the future. Regulations will probably change, as well as other items that we need to address. So at this point, it's status quo at the back. I don't know anything about that trail. It's actually new information for me. So I'm quite intrigued to find out a little bit about that as well. And I don't think my property owner knows that either. So. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Rennie.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. Is there anyone who in the audience who wishes to speak who did not pre-register? If there is anyone else wishes to speak, please come forward at this time. All right, I'm going to ask members of council if you have any input at this point. Nobody has a comment. So I'm going to go back to you, Meredith, if there's any points raised that our development services team would like to respond to.
Not at this time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, for attending this meeting and sharing your thoughts on this application. This matter will now be referred back to Development Services staff to follow up on any additional information required from the applicant based on the matters raised today. Once staff are satisfied that they have all necessary information needed to provide a recommendation on the applications, a detailed planning report will be brought back to council to assist us in our decision-making. This report will evaluate how the proposal does or does not satisfy the provincial, county, and municipal policies that must be considered as part of council's decision. It will also explore the various public and agency comments received regarding the applications, noting those tools which may be applied in order to address concerns raised and to mitigate potential impacts on nearby properties. If you would like to receive mailed notice of a future decision on this file, please provide your contact information to the Planning Services Division by email at planning@meaford.ca. And that brings our meeting to a close, and I'm going to call it adjourned. Thank you.